My name is Chloe Morgan, and I'm 25 years old. As it happens, for the last 3 years, I've essentially been a mother to my sister's 3 children. They feel like my own. It all started when my small business, a cozy flower shop I had poured my entire soul into, completely failed. I was left with empty pockets and shattered hopes. Moving in with my sister seemed like the only way out, a chance to get back on my feet and start fresh. But instead of rebuilding my own life, I imperceptibly turned into her round-the-clock, unpaid workforce. My entire day was dedicated to her kids. I made breakfast, lunch, and dinner, drove them to school and activities, did homework with them, and solved all their problems. My sister worked night shifts, and we barely saw each other. She simply vanished from their lives, leaving all the responsibility to me. I desperately tried to carve out time for myself, too. I had to juggle an exhausting job as a receptionist at a local veterinary clinic with online web development courses, which I stayed up late into the night studying for. I was still clinging to the dream of a new career, but with each day filled with someone else's worries, that dream seemed more and more ghostly and unattainable. And then, late one evening, she shared some news with me. By the way, I'm having another baby. A 4th one. In that moment, everything inside me went cold. I had already sacrificed everything I had, my modest savings, my career goals, and every free minute. The thought of another child in this situation seemed simply unbearable. I can't do this anymore, escaped my lips. My voice was noticeably trembling, and I quickly went to my room to compose myself. I caught a glimpse of how her face changed. She clearly hadn't expected such a reaction from me and looked as if I had deeply offended her. It was at that second that I finally understood. I had to move out. I needed to find my own place and, at last, start building my own life. But she wasn't ready to just accept my decision. When I told her, her reaction was explosive, and we had an incredibly difficult conversation. It quickly escalated into the biggest disagreement we had ever had. What happened next changed the relationships in our family forever. If I try to remember those days now, looking back, I realize that every single one was like a drawn-out, no-holds-barred fight. The morning always began with a cacophony. My alarm shattered the silence at 6 a.m. sharp. Barely opening my eyes, I dragged myself out of bed because I knew I didn't have a single minute to pull myself together. The house was already in its usual morning chaos. The eldest, 10-year-old Mia, was already in a full-blown argument with 6-year-old Lily over a cereal box. "You ate all the ones with marshmallows yesterday, today is my turn," Lily shouted, trying to snatch the box from her sister. "I got it first," Mia retorted, not backing down. I would burst into the kitchen to separate them, and at that very moment, 4-year-old Zoe, the youngest, would spill an entire cup of milk on the freshly mopped floor. As I stumbled to get a rag, Lily would already be pulling at my sleeve, demanding I immediately braid her hair, just like Elsa's. I barely had time for a single sip of my long cold coffee before I somehow wrangled them all into their jackets and herded them into the old minivan to get everyone to school and daycare on time. Every trip to school and daycare turned into a real test of my nerves. As soon as the minivan started moving, 10-year-old Mia would blast some deafening, screechy music on her phone. 6-year-old Lily would immediately start whining pitifully that she didn't like this song and that she didn't want to go to math. And 4-year-old Zoe, securely buckled in her car seat, would chatter relentlessly, asking a million questions a minute, from "Why don't dogs eat salad?" to "Are we there yet?" By the time I dropped off the last one, my head would be buzzing like a disturbed beehive. From there, I'd race to the veterinary clinic to make my 6-hour reception shift. It was a non-stop stream of barking dogs, panicked owners, and incessantly ringing phones. "Are you ever going to help me?" I'd been waiting for 5 whole minutes. A man in an expensive suit barked, while I tried to keep a squirming kitten on the counter with one hand and answer an urgent call with the other. My salary was laughable, it barely covered gas and my phone bill. After work, the race continued. I would pick up the girls, and round 2 of chaos would begin. I had to check Mia's homework, cook dinner, usually simple mac and cheese, and act as judge in another dispute, this time over which cartoon they would watch on TV. My sister, Jessica, worked the night shift at some warehouse with her boyfriend, Blake. This meant she was either asleep behind a closed door or simply not home. Our communication was reduced to 10 minutes a day when we'd cross paths in the kitchen. She'd usually toss out a, "Thanks, Chloe, you're such a lifesaver," and immediately disappear into her room. Only the dead of night was my time. After putting Zoe to bed and making sure the older girls were in their beds too, I would, barely staying on my feet from exhaustion, open my old laptop. It was time for my online web development courses. I had always loved technology. I had a dream of one day opening my own small studio and building websites. But trying to absorb complex code at midnight, when my eyes were sticking together and burning from strain, felt like a completely hopeless endeavor. I often fell asleep right at the desk, only to wake up a couple of hours later because the laptop battery had died. One late evening, as I was already nodding off over my laptop, trying to make sense of the code, my room door creaked open quietly. It was Lily. She slipped inside, clutching an old teddy bear. "Chloe, why are your eyes always so tired?" she whispered. I tried to force an encouraging smile. "Just trying to get everything done, sweetie." She climbed onto my lap and hugged me tightly around the neck. For one brief second, I felt completely needed. But immediately, a bitter taste appeared in my throat. Needed for what? To braid hair, cook dinners, break up their fights, and wipe away tears. I was performing all the functions of a mother, but this wasn't my family. In that moment, it was as if I woke up and began to truly notice how much I had shouldered. 10-year-old Mia needed to be driven to gymnastics 4 times a week, and she needed help with a huge science project that I was, in essence, doing for her at night. 6-year-old Lily had a school play coming up, and of course, I couldn't miss it. And little Zoe's chronic asthma had flared up, which meant constant trips to the pharmacy for expensive inhalers. I watched in horror as my own savings, the $3,000 I had miraculously managed to save after my flower shop collapsed, melted away before my eyes. They were going to their school supplies, activity fees, and endless doctor visits. Jessica, my sister, occasionally contributed to the pot, but her money barely covered rent and some of the groceries. Blake, her boyfriend, who worked the same night shifts as her and definitely lived with us, didn't offer a cent toward the household. "You're so good with them, Chloe," Jessica often said, as if it were the highest compliment. But I finally understood, it wasn't a compliment. It was a trap. It was her permission to use me. I wasn't building my life. I was just living her life for her. One evening, when I felt like I was about to break, I dialed Emily, my best friend. I just needed to vent. "I'm drowning, Em. I'm just going under," I whispered, pacing back and forth in the kitchen while the girls watched TV in the next room. Emily, who had been successfully freelancing in web development for several years, exactly what I dreamed of, never beat around the bush. "Chloe, wake up. You are not their mother," she said flatly. "You can't just cancel your own dreams because your sister decided it's convenient for her." Her words hit where it hurt the most. I looked down at my laptop, which was open on the kitchen table. On the screen was my course project, a half-finished code for a portfolio website. I realized with horror that I hadn't touched it in almost 2 weeks. My inbox was full of automated emails from the online course platform about missed deadlines. I was hopelessly behind. It wasn't about the girls. I adored them to pieces. I loved this madhouse, this life they created. I loved 10-year-old Mia's budding sarcasm, 6-year-old Lily's dramatic hugs, and the way 4-year-old Zoe would wrap her arms around my neck, trusting me completely. In every sense but one, they were my family. But I was not their parent. Jessica was their mother. And she was a ghost here. Blake, her boyfriend, also acted as if caring for the children was exclusively my responsibility, not his. I often heard him laughingly tell Jessica in the hallway that they were a great team. But in reality, their teamwork meant I was doing absolutely everything alone. I sat down at the table and, for the first time in a long time, just did the math. 10 hours a day, minimum, was spent on the kids, driving, picking up, feeding, putting to bed, comforting, doing homework. 6 hours, my shift at the vet clinic. 3 hours in the dead of night, for desperate attempts to cram studies into my head. I looked at the clock. I had, if I was very lucky, 5 hours left for sleep. My dream, to become a web developer, to get a new profession, to build something of my own, it wasn't just on hold. It was slipping further and further away from me with each passing day. One late evening, when little Zoe had finally fallen asleep, after a full hour of tears because her favorite nightlight burned out, I was sitting alone in the kitchen. I was just staring blankly at my laptop screen. Instead of finishing a complex JavaScript project for my course, I had recently been making a simple HTML page with animated kittens for Zoe. It was the only coding I had the energy for. A painful tightness gripped my chest. I wasn't just exhausted. I felt like I was disappearing. My identity was dissolving. Every new day I dedicated entirely to raising Jessica's children was irrevocably stealing time from the life I was so desperately trying to build for myself. I adored these girls, but I could no longer so shamelessly sacrifice myself. Something had to change drastically. And as soon as possible. About a week later, I was standing in the living room, mechanically folding an endless mountain of kids' laundry. The front door burst open, and Jessica practically flew into the house. Her face was beaming with a happy smile I hadn't seen on it in months. Right behind her, with a pizza box in one hand and a smug grin on his face, walked in Blake. "Chloe. We have amazing news," Jessica sang, her voice ringing with uncharacteristic excitement. She grabbed my arm, pulled me away from the laundry, and practically shoved me onto the sofa. "I'm pregnant," she blurted out. "We're having a fourth. Can you believe it?" Blake, still grinning, slapped the pizza box down on the coffee table as if it were a grand prize in a lottery, as if they were bringing a celebration into the home. My jaw tightened. I felt the blood drain from my face, but I forced my muscles to stretch into a smile. "Wow. Jess. Congratulations," I managed to stammer. But inside, everything dropped and turned over. Another one. A new baby. I was already drowning, choking under the weight of responsibility for 3. And they stood before me, glowing with happiness, genuinely expecting me to be happy about this new burden, which, as they both perfectly understood, would land squarely on my shoulders. Later that evening, as we were listlessly picking at the cold pizza, Jessica dropped the real bombshell. "Blake and I were talking," she began, glancing quickly at him. Blake just leaned back in his chair, arms crossed over his chest, with that same smug grin. "You're so amazing with the girls, Chloe. Just a natural mom. And we thought, since there's another one on the way, we're going to need you to take on a little more." I froze, a piece of pizza halfway to my mouth. "More?" I repeated. "Yeah," Blake interjected casually, picking his teeth. "We're both working like crazy at the warehouse. With a new baby, we just physically won't be able to handle it all. So we thought maybe you should quit that vet clinic job of yours. To, focus full-time on the house and the kids." My breath caught. "Quit my job?" I echoed, disbelieving. Besides, Jessica immediately chimed in, her tone instantly shifting from cheerful to businesslike. "Money is going to be really tight. So we think it's only fair if you start contributing your share for living here. Let's say, $250 a month. For your room." My heart started pounding so hard it throbbed in my ears. $250. I was barely scraping by for gas because all my tiny savings had been drained by Zoe's unexpected trip to the dentist and Mia's gymnastics. I tried my best to stay calm and speak evenly. "Jessica, I'm already doing everything. I drive them, I cook for them, I clean up after them, I do their homework. I can't quit. That's my only income." Jessica's eyes narrowed. All her forced cheerfulness evaporated. "You're living in my house, Chloe. You're eating our food. You're using our electricity. You kinda owe us, Blake added lazily. And anyway, it's not forever. Just temporary. Until the baby's born, then we'll figure something out. Temporary. His casual tone, the word temporary. I had been their temporary support for 3 damn years. My blood boiled. I felt like I was going to explode any second. I sharply pushed my plate of half-eaten pizza away and stood up from the table. I need to think about this, I managed to get out through clenched teeth. It was the only thing I could say without telling them everything I was really thinking. I left the room before it was too late. As soon as the girls were off at school and daycare, I dialed Emily. I was struggling to contain my anger as I told her they were now demanding I quit my clinic job and pay them $250 for my room. I told her they were treating me like a servant. Emily reacted instantly. She stated bluntly that Jessica and Blake were blatantly using me and that I was not their housekeeper. She sternly reminded me about my web development courses and how I was abandoning my career. Her directness was unpleasant, but absolutely fair. I had been so consumed with solving their endless problems that I had completely forgotten about my own plans. After ending the call, I looked at my laptop, where my abandoned course project lay. I was hopelessly behind schedule. And all for the sake of performing motherly duties for Jessica's children. In the following days, Jessica and Blake only increased the pressure. Jessica tried to manipulate me using the kids, handing me another to-do list, grocery shopping, booking Zoe's follow-up dental appointment, and paying Mia's gymnastics fees. Blake went even further, suggesting I sell the remaining equipment from my old flower shop to contribute my share. I was furious. This was no longer a request for help. This was a direct demand that I completely give up my life for their convenience. I began to see clearly how they both purposefully avoided any responsibilities. Jessica would sleep in peacefully in the mornings, ignoring the girls' arguments, leaving me to deal with them. Blake, returning from his shift, would just relax and chat with Jessica while I stood at the stove cooking dinner for the whole family. They didn't even see me. I was just a convenient tool for them, making their lives easier. One late evening, as I was closing my laptop, trying to ward off a headache after several hours of studying, Mia came into the kitchen. "Chloe, are you okay?" she asked, her voice lacking its usual 10-year-old sass, only quiet concern. I froze for a second, then honestly exhaled, trying, "Sweetie." She just nodded, as if she understood far more than she should at her age. The kids saw everything. They were well aware of how much I was doing. Only Jessica and Blake stubbornly believed this was how it was supposed to be. That night, I lay in bed, but sleep wouldn't come. Thoughts swirled in my head. I couldn't live like this anymore. My savings were almost gone. My web development courses were abandoned. My dream of a new career was fading before my eyes. I had to find a way out. Not just for myself, but for the girls. I didn't want them to see me give up. I opened my laptop again, but this time I went to a rental listings website. My fingers trembled as I typed "one-bedroom apartment" into the search. $250 a month. I thought with a bitter smile that I'd rather pay that money for my own tiny studio. I am not their servant. And I've had enough of this treatment. The next evening, I was sitting in the kitchen helping Lily with her reading homework. Suddenly, Jessica burst into the room, her face dark and her arms crossed over her chest. "We need to talk," she snapped, her voice cutting through the silence. I put the textbook down, bracing myself internally for a new attack. "What's wrong?" I asked, trying to keep my voice from wavering. Jessica didn't beat around the bush. "You're not pulling your weight at all, Chloe. I asked you to take on more responsibility, and you keep running off to that vet clinic of yours. It's just irresponsible." My breath hitched. Irresponsible? I had been running her entire household alone for 3 years. "I'm doing everything I can," I retorted sharply. "I cook, I clean, and I drive the girls to all their activities every single day." Jessica just rolled her eyes in annoyance. That's not enough anymore. The baby's coming soon. We need you here, with the family, not wasting time chasing after those hobby courses of yours. I pushed my chair back abruptly, and it scraped loudly against the floor. My web development courses are not a hobby, Jessica. They're my only chance at a future. Jessica let out a cold, bitter laugh. A future? You're living in my house, Chloe. You're eating my food. Do you think you're too good to help us now? Her words were deeply hurtful. An angry reply was on the tip of my tongue, but I saw Lily standing in the kitchen doorway, watching us with wide, frightened eyes. I took a shaky breath, trying to calm down. I am not your servant, Jessica. I've already given 3 years of my life to your family. She stepped toward me, lowering her voice to a threatening whisper. Well, you know, if you're not with us, maybe you don't belong here at all. I froze. Did she just imply I should leave? Without giving me a chance to say a word, she spun around and stormed out of the kitchen, leaving me alone, trembling with hurt. I grabbed my phone and stormed out into the backyard, quickly dialing Emily. I paced the grass, barely keeping my voice down. She called me irresponsible. She genuinely believes I owe her my entire life. Emily's voice was calm but firm. Chloe, you have to set boundaries immediately. You are not their hired hand and you are not their mother. You deserve to have your own place and your own goals. I nodded silently, though she couldn't see me. I know, Em, but the girls, they need me so much. Emily cut me off immediately. They need their mom, Chloe. Not you, sacrificing everything for them. Find yourself an apartment. You still have those savings, right? Her words ignited a spark of determination in me. I had been so focused on Jessica's demands and her attacks that I hadn't even thought about what options I had. That night, I opened my laptop again, but this time, instead of my courses, I opened a rental website for Riverdale, the next town over. I found several options, tiny but clean studios, with prices hovering around $900 a month. My $3,000 from the flower shop could cover the deposit and the first 2 months' rent, giving me a small cushion. I would have to not only keep my job at the vet clinic but possibly ask for extra shifts. I started scribbling numbers in a notebook. My heart was pounding with a wild mix of fear and excitement. They were demanding $250 a month from me to live in eternal debt. I'd rather pay $900 and finally have my freedom. I could do this. I just had to. But I couldn't stop thinking about the girls. About the quiet worry in 10-year-old Mia's eyes. About how 6-year-old Lily shyly hugged me. About 4-year-old Zoe's endless chatter and how tightly her little arms clung to my neck. My leaving would undoubtedly hurt them. But if I stayed, I would lose myself completely. The next day after school, I pulled Mia aside to talk to her alone. I'll probably be moving out soon, I said quietly, watching her reaction closely. She immediately frowned, fiddling with the hem of her t-shirt. Is it because of Mom? She asked directly. I nodded. Sweetie, I need to build my own life, too. But that doesn't mean I'm abandoning you. I'll still be around, just in a different way. She said almost nothing, but I could see her seriously considering my words. That whole evening, I sat with my notebook, trying to make ends meet. Rent in Riverdale, $900. Utilities and food, at least another $400. And $200 for my web development courses. My salary at the vet clinic, where I worked 6 hours a day, would barely cover those numbers. It meant I would have to cut back on absolutely everything. Forget new clothes, coffee to go, and any other little luxuries. It was scary, but it was a plan. Jessica, of course, noticed my detachment in the following days. You've been acting weird, she tossed out one morning, catching me scrolling through apartment listings on my phone. I didn't even look up. Just making plans, I replied evenly. She snorted. Plans to abandon us, right? Typical. Her words stung, but I didn't get into an argument. I wasn't going to play by her rules anymore. Later, Emily texted to check on me. "You're doing the absolute right thing," her message read. "Don't let her guilt trip you." I clung to those words like a life raft. I knew I had to see this through. I wasn't just moving out. I was taking my own life back. By the end of the week, I had a list of addresses to view and a clear plan, and I no longer cared what obstacles Jessica tried to throw in my way. A few days later, as soon as I had dropped the girls off at school and daycare, I secretly drove to Riverdale to see the first apartment on my list. It was a studio, tiny, basically one room with a small kitchenette, but as I stood there in the quiet, I vividly pictured it as mine. It would be a space where I could finally breathe, focus on my web development projects, and just be myself. The landlord confirmed the price, $900 a month plus a matching security deposit. I nodded silently, clutching my phone. My $3,000 in savings would be just enough to cover the initial payment and the move, but I would have to pinch every single penny. When I returned to Jessica's house, I kept my plan a closely guarded secret, trying to avoid her snide remarks. I wasn't ready for another fight until I was sure of everything. Instead, I decided to focus on preparing the girls, starting with the eldest, Mia. After dinner, while the younger ones watched cartoons, I pulled her aside. "Mia, we need to talk seriously," I said quietly. "If I move, I'm going to need your help. You'll have to take on a little more responsibility." Her eyes immediately flashed with anger. "You're leaving?" "It's because of Mom, isn't it?" she snapped. I tried to stay calm. "I'm not leaving you. I just want to teach you some things so you can help." I showed her how to make a simple grocery list, how to heat up dinner in the microwave for herself and her sisters, and, most importantly, how to make sure little Zoe packed her daycare backpack the night before. She's only 10, but she's very smart. She huffed and grumbled, but I could see she was listening and remembering. Lily seemed to have overheard part of our conversation. She caught me alone in the kitchen later, her voice barely audible. "Chloe, are you moving, because we're too much trouble?" she asked, fiddling with the hem of her pajamas. My heart broke. "No, sweetie, no. Gosh, of course not. It's not about you at all. I really need my own place to work." She immediately threw herself at me and hugged me tight, burying her face in my shirt. I felt her shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. I hugged her back tightly, promising over and over that I would still be around. With 4-year-old Zoe, it was the hardest. At her age, she just couldn't understand the whole picture. At breakfast, I tried to gently explain that Aunt Chloe would be living in a different house soon, but very, very close by. She frowned, her bottom lip trembling. "But who will do my braids in the morning?" she asked. I assured her I would still come to visit, but her confused, scared looks made it clear she didn't understand. I spent the next few days on secret trips to Riverdale, looking at other options. One apartment overlooked a park, which would be lovely, but another was much closer to the vet clinic, which was far more practical for work. In the end, I settled on that first studio for $900. I went over my meager budget again and again. My salary at the clinic was about $2,000 a month. After rent, utilities, and food for one, I'd have very little left, but it should be enough. I would just have to give up all luxuries. I would also most likely have to temporarily freeze my web development courses for at least a month to build a tiny financial cushion for unexpected expenses. But I consoled myself that I could resume my studies as soon as I was firmly on my feet. When Emily called next to check in, she was thrilled that I was finally moving from words to action. "You're taking back control, Chloe," she said confidently. "The girls will be fine. You're setting a great example for them by showing them how to stand up for yourself." Her words gave me strength, but seeing the girls' upset and anxious faces every day was still unbearably hard. One evening, I decided it was time to teach Mia how to use the washing machine. "Look, darks always separate from lights," I explained methodically, showing her how to measure the detergent. "And don't use too much, or you'll have more suds than sense." She rolled her eyes dramatically, as a 10-year-old should, but I saw her watching closely, memorizing every move. "Mom never does this," she muttered quietly under her breath. I just nodded, not knowing what to say to that. It was becoming obvious that Mia was starting to notice Jessica's complete indifference to their lives more and more acutely, and it hurt her far more than she tried to show. Lily tried not to leave my side these days, often helping me put Zoe to bed, but I kept noticing her eyes were red from holding back tears. Little Zoe couldn't understand what was happening and kept asking when I would come visit them. She would cling tightly to my leg whenever I left for work and whisper, "Chloe, don't leave for good." My heart was simply breaking from their anxiety, but I knew I couldn't turn back now. The following week, I huffed as I dragged the last cardboard box into my new studio in Riverdale. It was tiny, and the only furniture was a mattress on the floor and a small desk by the window. But it was my own space. My new, hard-won beginning. The first thing I did was unpack and set up my laptop on the desk. I looked at it and felt an incredible weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in 3 years, I felt light. I immediately sent a quick text to Mia, Lily, and Zoe, promising we would have a pizza night soon. Jessica hadn't said a word since the day I signed the lease. Her icy, contemptuous silence was a real relief after months of constant tension and fighting. I naively thought I had left that whole nightmare behind, but I had catastrophically underestimated her. 2 days later, as I was hanging up clothes, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number. "This is Officer Miller with the Riverdale Police Department," said a smooth, professional voice. My heart sank somewhere into my stomach. "Did something happen to?" "We received a theft complaint at your sister's address," he interrupted me. "Could you come down to give a statement?" I immediately got in my car, frantically trying to figure out what this could mean. When I pulled up to Jessica's house, a police car was already in the driveway. Next to it stood 2 officers, Officer Miller, holding a tablet, and his partner, Officer Carter, who was examining the front door. Jessica was standing on the porch, her face purple with rage. As soon as she saw me, she immediately threw up her hand and pointed at me. "There she is. Arrest her," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "She stole $5,000 from me. And our grandmother's expensive ring, the one she gave me. She trashed the place. The washing machine is broken, and the sofa is all cut up." I was stunned by this outrageous lie. "What?" "That's not true," I said firmly, looking directly at Officer Miller. "I didn't take a single thing. I moved out and left everything in perfect order." Officer Miller looked at me with an unreadable expression. "Well, let's take a look at this so-called damage," he said, nodding toward the house. Jessica, seething with anger, led us inside. She immediately pointed to a cushion on the sofa that had a noticeable tear, and then to the washing machine in the corner. "See? She broke it. It won't turn on." "She did it out of revenge, right before she left," she insisted. I just shook my head, feeling anger rising in me. "I didn't touch your things, Jessica. I've been at my new apartment for the last 2 days." Officer Carter walked over to the sofa and crouched down. He carefully examined the tear on the cushion and then lifted the fabric, revealing old, set-in stains underneath. This doesn't look like recent damage," he remarked. Then he went to the washing machine. After inspecting it from behind, he found that one of the wires had simply come loose from the connector. "And this," he said, plugging it back in, "looks more like regular wear and tear." I turned to Jessica. "You know perfectly well I didn't steal anything. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Search my car. Go to my apartment and search it. Go ahead. You won't find anything." Officer Miller looked at my sister again, his gaze hardening. "Ma'am, you're making some very serious accusations. Do you have any proof at all to support the theft of this $5,000, the ring, or the vandalism?" Jessica's confidence wavered. Her eyes darted around the room, and she began to hesitate. "Well, the money was in my dresser," she muttered. "And the ring, too." She knew where I kept them. Before I could respond to this absurdity, Mia quietly entered the room. Her pale face was tense. She stopped in the doorway and looked directly at the officers. "Excuse me," she said, her quiet voice sounding surprisingly loud in the sudden silence. I need to tell you something." My heart pounded. What was she going to say? Mia stepped forward. She looked right at Officer Miller, her voice trembling but surprisingly firm. "That's not true. My mom is making it all up." Jessica froze. "That hole in the sofa has been there for ages," Mia continued, pointing at the cushion. "Lily spilled grape juice on it back in the summer. And the washing machine." She hesitated and looked at the machine. "It did break yesterday. It broke because Mom tried to wash all her jackets and a blanket at the same time, even though Aunt Chloe told her not to 100 times. Jessica's eyes widened with fury. "Mia, be quiet and go to your room right now." She shrieked, but there was a clear note of panic in her voice. But Mia didn't stop. She took another step forward, her fists clenched. "And the money and the ring? She's lying about that, too. I saw Mom give Blake a wad of cash and Grandma's ring this morning. I heard her tell him, 'Hide this well before the police get here.' She set this all up." The silence that fell in the room was deafening. Jessica's face went from red to deathly pale. "Aunt Chloe took care of us this whole time," Mia almost shouted. "She did our homework with us and paid for my gymnastics while you and Blake were almost never home." I looked at this 10-year-old girl, and my heart ached. Officer Carter, who had been taking notes, slowly closed his notebook. His gaze, like Officer Miller's, turned icy. They looked at Jessica. "Ma'am," Officer Miller began, speaking very quietly and distinctly, "do you understand what conspiracy to file a false police report is? That is a very serious offense." Jessica started to tremble. She couldn't utter a word. "We won't be filing a report today," the officer continued. "But this call and your daughter's testimony are documented. One more incident like this, and you will be in serious trouble." The officers gave me a short nod and headed to their car. When they had left, I walked over to Mia, who was still standing on the porch, and crouched down in front of her. "Me. Sweetie, thank you. But you didn't have to." I began quietly. She shrugged, not looking at me, and kicked a small pebble on the path. "She shouldn't have done that to you. You didn't deserve it. You were always there for us." I couldn't hold back and hugged her tightly, fighting back the tears that were welling up. Back in my studio, I immediately called Emily. I was still shaking. "You won't believe what just happened. Jessica called the cops." I blurted out, pacing my tiny room. "She accused me of stealing $5,000 and Grandma's ring. She had Blake hide them." If Mia hadn't seen it and told the officers, I don't know what would have happened. "I'm so done with her crazy games." Emily's voice on the phone was sharp and cold. "She's spiraling, Chloe. She's losing her free leverage over you. She's lashing out. Just stay as far away from her as possible." I hung up, agreeing with Emily. I looked around my tiny studio in Riverdale. The furnishings were more than modest, but it was my sanctuary. A place free from Jessica's lies and manipulation. That evening, I texted Mia to check on them. Responses started pouring in almost immediately. Lily sent me a photo of her school drawing, and Mia asked when I was coming to visit. Later, Zoe asked me to tell her a story over the phone. I promised we would see each other soon, but this disgusting scene with the police that Jessica had caused complicated everything. Mia's words to the officers stuck in my head. She and Blake were almost never home. It was the bitter truth. These girls deserved so much better than parents who had simply disappeared from their lives. I realized that by living there, I wasn't helping them, I was just covering for Jessica's failures. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop, diving into my web development project. For the first time in months, my hands on the keyboard weren't shaking. I felt focused. Jessica could call the police and lie, but she couldn't stop me. I was finally building something of my own, and no one could take this new feeling of freedom away from me. 2 weeks went by. I was just about to leave for my shift at the vet clinic when my phone rang. It was Mia. Her voice was cracking with panic. "Chloe. Mom's in the hospital. Something's wrong with the pregnancy, that's what the doctors said. We're home alone, and Lily and Zoe are crying." I froze, my coffee mug halfway to my lips. Despite all the crap Jessica had put me through, her lies and accusations, all I could think about were Mia's scared eyes, Lily's quiet tears, and Zoe's confusion. They hadn't done anything wrong. "I'm on my way," I said, grabbing my keys and racing to the hospital, my mind spinning. In the emergency room, I was met by the attending physician, Dr. Harris. "Your sister has a complication called placenta previa," she explained calmly. "She'll have to be on strict bed rest. Likely until the delivery." I nodded slowly. Until the delivery. That meant almost 3 more months. My stomach tightened. I found Jessica in her room. She looked pale, small, and scared, the complete opposite of the angry, self-assured woman she had been. "The girls are alone," she whispered, avoiding my gaze. "They need you." A part of me wanted to just turn around and leave. To remind her about the police, about her words. But Mia's frightened voice on the phone echoed in my ears. "I'll handle the girls," I said firmly. "But listen to me, Jessica. This time, it's going to be different. It's going to be on my terms." A flash of resentment crossed Jessica's face, but I didn't look away. "First, I'm keeping my job at the vet clinic. Second, I'm staying in my studio. Third, I'm not paying you $1 in rent. I'll help until you're better, but not for more than 3 months. I'm doing this only for the girls." She nodded silently, she just didn't have the strength to argue. I wasn't there for her. I was there for Mia, Lily, and Zoe. When I got to their house, the girls were in a complete state. 6-year-old Lily immediately latched onto me, her voice trembling. "Is Mom going to be okay?" I held her tight, assuring her that Dr. Sullivan was doing everything possible. Little Zoe wouldn't leave my side and kept asking where Blake had gone. And 10-year-old Mia, the eldest, was trying her best to hold it together and look grown up, but her tightly clenched fists betrayed how scared she was. The house was a disaster, as if no one had been there for days. The sink was piled high with dirty dishes, the laundry basket was overflowing, and the girls' school things were scattered all over the living room. Blake was nowhere to be found. It seemed his shifts at the warehouse had suddenly gotten much longer. When he finally showed up late that night, he barely glanced at me, silently grabbed a beer from the fridge, and immediately disappeared into the garage. "He's been like that ever since Mom went to the hospital," Mia muttered quietly, watching him go. I took control of the situation, but not at all like before. I sat Mia and Lily down at the kitchen table. I explained to Mia that she was now in charge of making sure Lily did the dishes, and she herself would be loading the laundry. "You're a team now," I told them firmly. Even Zoe got a simple task, to put away the toys in her room before bed. I stuck to my conditions rigidly. I would come over right after my shift at the vet clinic, cook dinner, and help with homework. But I was no longer their 24/7 nanny. I refused to stay overnight, and every evening, after putting them to bed, I drove back to my studio. Making matters worse, Blake had simply checked out. He was constantly at work, and his indifference hurt the girls deeply, especially when he missed Lily's school play. Mia noticed, remarking bitterly that he bailed, as usual. I realized their family was falling apart, and I stopped trying to save it, focusing only on making sure Mia, Lily, and Zoe were fed and felt safe. Emily called, worried I would get trapped again. I assured her it was different this time. I had boundaries, it was temporary, and I was returning to my studio every night. Despite her valid warnings, I couldn't abandon the kids. And so, nearly a month passed in this exhausting rhythm, vet clinic, then my sister's house, than my own space. Jessica would call from the hospital, but I kept my conversations with her extremely short. Blake's presence in the house dwindled to nothing. His excuses about endless shifts at the warehouse became background noise that no longer fooled anyone. He had completely abdicated all responsibility. Because of this, an impossible burden fell on 10-year-old Mia's shoulders. I watched with pain as this little girl tried to be an adult. She managed the groceries and repeatedly comforted Zoe when she woke up from nightmares. One evening, when we were alone in the kitchen, her composure cracked. "I'm really scared for Mom," she admitted, staring at the table, "but I'm so mad at her, Chloe. She was never really with us. Even before she got sick." That childish admission made my heart ache. I nodded silently. I knew my departure was inevitable, but for now, I was needed to keep these girls from facing this chaos alone. However, my own world was no longer dissolving into their problems. Every evening, I got in my car and returned to my quiet studio in Riverdale. I would open my laptop and dive into my web development projects. This routine was my anchor. I was helping them, but I was no longer sacrificing myself. 3 months passed like this. Jessica was finally discharged and came home with the baby in her arms. I had kept my promise. I was there as long as she needed me. But my time was up. I drove to the house one last time and found her in the kitchen. My resolve was unshakable. "Jessica, I'm done," I said calmly but firmly. "I adore the girls, you know that. But I won't be a part of this anymore. I've had enough." Jessica immediately accused me of abandoning them again, but I was adamant. I calmly told her I had given them 2 years, and now it was her turn to be a mother. She had no response and just turned away. And that was it. I left, severing my relationship with her for good. But I couldn't sever my ties with the girls. Mia, Lily, and Zoe didn't deserve that. So I came up with a new plan. I called Emily, who lived nearby, and she agreed to be my go-between. I started sending her $100 a month from my vet clinic's salary so she could buy the girls what they needed, from school supplies to treats. Thanks to Emily, we set up regular video calls. I still helped Mia with her homework, and Lily and Zoe showed me their drawings. It couldn't replace being there in person, but it was the only way to stay in their lives without falling under Jessica's toxic influence. From Emily, I learned that the situation at Jessica's house was getting worse. My sister, as expected, went on maternity leave from her warehouse job, and now they were desperately short on money. To top it all off, Blake had finally distanced himself from her. He barely came home anymore, citing work, but Mia told Emily he just didn't want to be with them. I felt for the girls, but I couldn't fix their family. I focused on what I could control. I consistently sent Emily $100 for Mia, Lily, and Zoe's needs and never missed our video calls. During these calls, the girls constantly asked me to come back and live with them again. It broke my heart, and one day Lily accidentally let it slip. "Mom says we should ask you to come back so you can help us." I immediately knew whose words those were. It was hard to hear, but it only strengthened my resolve. Keeping my distance from Jessica was the only way to save myself. Meanwhile, I threw myself into freelance work. My web development courses had paid off. I landed a major project from a local startup. It was grueling work, but it allowed me to become financially independent. My studio was my sanctuary, and for the first time, I was building something of my own. Emily kept me updated. Jessica's situation was tough. Blake had all but disappeared, and her maternity pay wasn't enough. But, unlike in the past, Jessica wasn't just drowning, she was forced to tread water. Emily said my sister was clumsily, but stubbornly, trying to learn how to manage a budget and was taking care of the baby herself. She was doing a terrible job, but for what seemed like the first time in her life, she was actually starting to do it. It was her own difficult stage of growing up, one she had to go through without me. My position remained firm. When Mia told Emily the girls didn't have winter coats, I immediately sent Emily $200. But I made it clear, that money was for the kids. I didn't call Jessica. I continued to be the video call aunt. Mia, Lily, and Zoe showed me their drawings and told me about school. They still asked me to come back, especially when Jessica lost her temper, but I gently but firmly stood my ground. I would always be there to help them, but I would never go back to her house. This story, for me, is a painful lesson that you can't let your kindness become your prison. Helping family is natural, but completely sacrificing yourself for those who refuse to take responsibility for their own lives isn't noble, it's slow self-destruction. I learned that sometimes, the most important person you have to save is yourself. Setting hard boundaries isn't an act of selfishness or betrayal. It's a necessary condition for survival. In the end, it's the only way to truly help those who need you, in my case, the girls, without drowning alongside those who are pulling you under.